Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Good. I see a dog there.
Yes, Sebastian is ready. He's always part of everything I do, especially lately. So this is
Um,
my little lumberjack.
oh, nice. I just saw him like trying to look up. So this is God and Matter, and today we have Miss Kyla Hill. She is also called Hempress Hill in some circles. Kyla, welcome. Who are you? And the audience needs to know.
Well, I am Kyla Hempress Hill, and I am a hemp enthusiast and a lifestyle advocate. So I've been working on this particular journey for the last decade, and things have constantly shifted along the way. I started with product development, and just from there, I would say today I'm more so lifestyle. So hemp is just such a small piece of it at this point.
So, what do you mean it's a small piece of it? Tell me more.
Um, well, I say it's a small piece of it because, when you're looking at lifestyle, hemp is a huge part of my life, but a small piece of my continued journey because I've learned so much about it. I've spoken about it. I've just absorbed myself in it. All of the clothes that I'm wearing on a regular basis are made of hemp. I've incorporated it as part of my transportation. I ride a hemp skateboard. I say that it's a small part of it because this year I really realized that not everyone relates to hemp. I think that it is a good transitional conversation piece when you're talking to people. But as far as the broader picture and where my journey continues from here, it's lifestyle as a whole. So phyto plants as a whole.
Oh, wow. So, as a whole, what exactly are you doing? Okay, you talked about your transportation, you talked about your
Hmm.
clothing, which is amazing, and you talked about what you eat as well. You incorporates hemp, right?
Yes, correct.
So, could you talk about the food part first because we are foodies
Oh,
around here.
awesome. Okay, well, hemp is actually what got me into a more sustainable lifestyle. So I incorporate a lot of hemp protein in most of my diet. I consider myself a vegan. Some people may relate to it as alkaline vegan. Most of what I eat does not contain any soy, any grains, of course, no dairy, no meat, and just an abundance of fruits and vegetables. So, with the transition and learning about hemp, I first was introduced to hemp milk. And this was back when I only knew hemp as what they advertised in High Times magazine. So, I was really, really intrigued by the fact that you could not only eat it, but actually make a milk out of it and clothing. So that was, back 10 years ago, the start of my journey. But today, being living a plant-based lifestyle, I eat a lot of hemp seeds, and the seeds provide like a good source of fiber, protein, essential fatty acid, other proteins. It can enjoy as a seed. The seed pressed into an oil. So there's just so many.
Yeah, the audio disturbed for a moment.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, so you were saying there's so many different things that people can do with hemp seeds, and
Yes, correct.
then it started to break up a bit. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of leave it.
I can't.
Does that work?
Okay, you're back now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with the audio.
Okay, you're back now.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, that you can enjoy it in a variety of ways. So as a powder, for example, this can be easily added to smoothies. If you're making a recipe that incorporates flour, I usually use like an almond flour, and I can sprinkle a little bit of the hemp protein powder as well. And in terms of using it as an oil, It does have a low smoke point, so it's not an oil that you want to cook with, similar to olive oil, but you can enjoy it with like a salad and just use it in place of olive oil. It does have an interesting flavor that might take getting used to, but nonetheless, it is a great way to incorporate all of these great nutrients into your diet. And then lastly, as a seed, the seed can easily be just sprinkled on salads. It can be added to any recipe that may call for sunflower seeds or just any type of protein in general. I use it to make burger patties. I use it for meatballs. I use it for just about anything, milk. So there's just so many different things, so many different ways you can incorporate it.
Cool. Now I have a question about two things.
Yes.
One, using it with almond milk. Isn't it kind of bad to have too many almonds?
Yeah, I think having anything in abundance could be bad. So I think it's important to kind of add variation to your diet whenever you can. And that's part of the reason why I've adopted to a grain-free lifestyle. But I would say with almonds, they are an excellent source of fats and proteins into your diet. But, you know, like you mentioned, it is something that you want to be mindful of and maybe not something that you want to be eating every day in large amounts.
Okay. And then also, olive oil is not a high temperature oil. So
Yes.
if you're using something that's high temperature, are you looking at like the avocado oil or coconut oil?
Yes, those can withstand higher temperatures. I wouldn't recommend using a lot of oil in general. So when I do use oil, I do opt for something with a higher smoke point, such as olive oil, grapeseed oil is another good one, coconut oil, as you mentioned. When you use something like olive oil, a lot of people don't realize when you heat that, I think it's around 300 degrees or so. When you heat it above that, then you open it up for free radicals, which causes toxicity into your food and it becomes carcinogenic. So it's not a good idea to cook with olive oil or hemp oil.
Yeah, olive oil is good to drizzle like after you finished your
Yes,
food.
correct.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
after you do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But avocado oil, I find that to be successful. Um,
Yes, avocado oil has a much higher smoke point, so
and
that
I
is a
also
great.
use sunflower oil sometimes. Do you ever
Yeah,
use?
I actually have some sunflower oil in the kitchen now that I'm using. But I think anything oil related is still kind of like we know what happens when we mix oil with water. So our bodies are 80% water, so it's not any different when we're ingesting it in that way.
You know, I have a story. I went to Puerto Rico to do some climate stories back at the end of November. I did, and I went to a place called Pueblo where they have become like this sustainable environment, and it's completely green, and they live pretty much off grid for their power source for most of the city. And I took too much olive oil, and I ended up getting like skin eruptions from too much olive oil.
Wow.
So you do have to keep that balance. You know, olive oil is good for you, but not that much. At least drink
Yeah.
like in
Yeah,
one.
I agree. That sounds like a beautiful trip, by the way. I'll have to get some more details about that. It sounds like
Yeah,
an
I will
ideal.
tell you, but it's Casa Puebla, and it was beautiful, and the people are lovely, and they are a great story of resilience. And from how they had the hurricane, they came back like being green and sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So with what you're doing, okay, I see you're drinking. Is that tea?
Yes, it is tea, and I'm drinking a chai tea with coconut milk, and I've added a dash of maca. So I usually like to start my day with a glass of water, of course, and followed by either tea or a smoothie. So today I'm drinking some tea.
Good. Now, I love tea myself. You said maca. Is that the green maca or are you using like the maca root?
So it's the maca root, and I'm using it as a concentrated powder. It's native to Peru, and it's an excellent source of protein, or not only protein, but it's more so to kind of enhance energy and vitality. And it also helps to manage stress and anxiety. So it just seems like such an appropriate thing to start the day with.
That's awesome. Now, I bought the yellow maca. Which one do you use?
The one that I have, I don't know if it's called yellow per se, but the powder is kind of like a darkish greenish yellow tint.
Okay.
So I usually add maybe about a teaspoon at a time. Unless I'm making a smoothie, I might add like more of a tablespoon. So it doesn't really take a lot to really get the health benefits from it as a concentrated powder.
That's great. So in going through with health, what would you suggest to people? We talked about the maca just now. What would you suggest to people who are trying to manage the stress? You know, a lot of people are stress eating Cheetos. That's not going to be good for you. Do you have any suggestions beyond the plant-based diet? And I do want to get back to something you said about being alkaline, because I think that is the key to being a successful vegan.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so to start the question, I would say when you're transitioning, right now is the perfect time because unfortunately we're limited on where we can go, but we have the ability to dictate what we're bringing into our house. And I think it starts by what's available to you. So for me, it did take a couple of years to transition. This is year 6 for me, but I started 8 years ago. So it took a couple of years to transition. I was back and forth with cravings, and once you kind of get past that and realize that your cravings are based on what you're feeding yourself, and if you can get past that point of, you know, constantly going back to Cheetos and just looking for good alternatives. So for someone who likes Cheetos, for example, there's a great alternative that's made with chickpeas, and it's made with vegan cheese. And that would be a good transitional food. You know, that's something that I used to eat over the last couple of years, you know. I've gotten to a point now where I really only eat what I cook at home. So when you're transitioning, I guarantee you there's a vegan alternative of everything, whether it's Cheetos or Doritos. And that's a good way to start. Just start by what you bring into your house and what you have available to you.
That's great. Now, you were talking about being alkaline. What does that
Yeah.
mean exactly? Because I don't tolerate soy very well at all, and I know a lot of people don't. In Asian cultures, they don't really consume soy the way that we are consuming it in the US. And a lot of the soy that's out there is not necessarily good for you just because it's soy.
Yes, what you're saying is absolutely correct. Soy is the actual crop that we have in the States next to corn. So it's likely that any soy that you're eating, if it's not organic, then it is genetically modified. So that alone is cause for concern. In addition to that, it is a lot of times super or ultra processed. So any of the nutritional benefits that you would normally be getting, it's been chemically engineered in such a way where you're probably not even absorbing any of those. And that goes along with anything that is highly acidic. It affects our ability to absorb nutrients. So a lot of people would argue that in a vegan diet, you're lacking protein and maybe B12, and it's not that you're not getting enough of it in your diet, it's that your body is, again, not absorbing it. So one way that I've learned over the years to better absorb those is to focus on foods that are higher in alkalinity and that aren't very acidic, and that has helped me tremendously. And another thing that I started to do within the last couple of years is sprout most of my nuts, legumes, and beans. And that's also another way to better absorb nutrients so that you don't have these deficiencies with your lifestyle change.
Now, I'm familiar with sprouting as you put it in water and you allow it to germinate or something, but can you explain more what that's like for people who don't know and for me who doesn't know that well?
Okay, well, for sprouting, it starts with the process of soaking. So most of the net seeds and legumes that we digest. In nature, they have a protective enzyme that protects them against insects and animals eating them before they're ready to be eaten, hence the germination. So by minimally soaking it, you release this enzyme, and that allows us to absorb nutrients. Without releasing the enzyme, a lot of times when we eat these things, they cause bloating and gas, and I'm sure everyone can relate to gas from beans and lentils, for example. But when you take it a step further with actually soaking it and allowing it to sprout, you're giving it life again, you know. So you're releasing the enzyme and you're pretty much growing it into a vegetable. And the whole sprouting process, you have to have a little bit of patience, and there's things that can go wrong in the process. But once you sprout it, you could see the germination of the seed or the net. You actually see the tail form, and it just makes our body work a lot less when we're digesting it.
That's great. Now, how long does the process take approximately?
So it depends what you're sprouting. I would say for anyone who's just getting started, lentils, they can sprout within a day or two. Cashews sprout really fast. I've seen that happen overnight. So the first step is to rinse your lentils, and then you would soak it. I recommend soaking it in like a distilled or purified water, not necessarily tap water, because it is going to absorb a lot of the water as it's soaking overnight. So the first step would be to soak it overnight. So that's probably going to be about 8 to 10 hours. After that, with lentils, you can start sprouting it pretty much after soaking it overnight. And then you would just create an environment where it is moist and slightly humid. And you want to rinse them, I'd say every 5 to 8 hours to prevent bacteria from growing. What'll happen if you don't change the water regularly, you're going to get mold, and it just creates a breeding ground for like E. coli and other bacteria to thrive. So the key is to keep them clean by rinsing them every couple hours and to start by soaking them. Now, something like a red bean, those take a very long time to germinate. So that's probably going to need to soak for at least 2 or 3 days, and then you won't even see sprouts until about the fourth day. So you're constantly rinsing and keeping it clean throughout the process.
Okay, so then overnight you can't do the, at least every 5 hours of washing it. So should they be refrigerating it? What should they do?
Well, I would say the longest that you should go without rinsing them is probably about 8 hours. I've gone a little bit longer than that before. As I was saying, it really depends on what you're sprouting, but I wouldn't go any longer than about 10 hours without rinsing them. So the first thing you do after you wake up, if you're soaking them overnight, for example, just rinse them as soon as you get to the kitchen.
Could you soak them with like garlic or ginger
I
or
haven't tried
lemon?
that. I haven't tried that, but I'm sure that that would work. I've heard of people adding salt as well.
Yeah, I would think that sea salt or the Himalayan salt
Mhm.
or a non-iodized salt is what I'm advocating, or a natural biotic like the ginger, the garlic,
Mhm.
lemon type things would help to retard the growth of any type of bacteria. So that's
That
probably
is a very good suggestion. I will have to try that. But the
good.
red beans, those are my least favorite thing to sprout because again, they take forever. And I'm always, just borderline wondering if I wait another day, is it going to start to mold? But I usually will put like my lentils, if I'm not going to eat them right away, I'll put them in the refrigerator, as you mentioned. But even in the refrigerator, you still want to rinse them every day because it's always going to hold moisture, which, will help mold to grow.
Yeah, that's true. Now, for those listening, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just a nutritional fan, and I've done a lot of research on eating foods that are good. And because I had a problem with my digestive tract for a number of years, I started to research. And I guess you went from problems too. So we're speaking from our personal experience, not as doctors.
Yes, and I will follow you on that. I am in no way a nutritionist. I am my own science experiment.
Yes, exactly. I learned a lot. Do you eat gluten?
No, I don't eat gluten.
Okay. Yeah, I actually had to go gluten-free at one point. It was so bad. My body was not absorbing nutrients, and I was going to the doctor. I had like less half the blood that you're supposed to have in your body. They're like, "How are you alive? How are you functioning?" And I refused the transfusions. And going gluten-free, I was able to have a stronger body, and my body was able to start to absorb the nutrients and improve. So that's something that happens with people because the
That's
villi,
amazing. That's
the
amazing.
villi don't absorb. Yeah, I mean, I used to be so tired. They're like, "Oh, you're anemic," and I'm not anemic. I used to have to take iron. I took so much iron at one point that I got like iron toxicity, and my iron binding capacity number was too high, and my platelet counts were too high. They're like, "How are you not dead? This is stroke range. This is,
Wow.
they're like, you can't do a massage, you can't do this, you can't do that. You just need to be quiet." And they tried to do an iron IV therapy, and I ended up unable to walk after the iron IV. It was crazy. And that was the last time, like, because initially they were like, "It's in your head. You can't be," because I'm saying, "I'm taking this iron you're telling me to take, and I'm shaking, I'm having all these, episodes." We're like, no, the body needs iron. But they didn't check my iron binding capacity to see that my body was binding at a higher level, that it was now poisonous to me. So you do have to be a custodian of your health as well as checking in with practitioners. I love your dog, Sebastian. This is
Yeah, he's not supposed to be on the couch. He sees that I'm distracted.
It's kind of funny. Yeah, so we've talked about health. Let's talk about your business. You were instrumental in helping this hemp movement to come forward, and you had a reality show, I believe, with hemp, didn't you? Do you want to talk about
Um,
the reality show?
yeah, so in the process of going from marketing to product development, um, it was such a niche at the time that a lot of people didn't understand hemp or CBD. And this was back about 6 years ago. Part of,
Sebastian is having fun.
yeah, he's showing off. So part of getting the word out there required me to become an advocate and really start to speak and share information on how hemp is different from its cousin and kind of helping people to understand the benefits of it. So that directly took me on a path of advocacy. So in the realm of things, I met other advocates from organizations such as Hemp Industry Association, Vote Hemp, and these are people that have been fighting for legislation longer than I even realized you can drink hemp. So I was able to find mentorship almost instantly with a lot of the laws that were changing in other states. So that's what took me to Colorado. They had auditions for a new reality show called The Marijuana Show, which was focused on the cannabis industry as a whole. So yeah, I flew from Virginia to Colorado for the audition to pitch my topical moisturizer, hemp butter. So I made it on the show. I made it to the second round, and that required me to come back home and kind of go on a mission of entrepreneurship and pitch my product to get into stores. So the first store that I went to was like a major chain, and they said no. And that's when I really realized that there was a lack of knowledge for the legitimacy of hemp. So that is really what drove the journey. So from reality show to advocacy. And then every year there's something that we call Hemp History Week, that is a chance for people in places around the country to organize their own educational events, and they get support from the Hemp Industry Association. So I took the lead of bringing Hemp History Week to the DMV. So that's really what led me to a lot of what I do in terms of education and advocacy. So after legislation was finally passed with 7606, the Farm Bill allowing hemp to be declassified almost, and allowing people to grow it. We had like a big celebration here in DC. DC is kind of like the hub of a lot of legislation. So it's just really cool that I've been so close to everything along the way.
It is cool that you've been so close to everything along the way. Now, you mentioned your product kind of in passing. I have used your product and it's great. Do you want to talk more about hemp butter?
Okay, well, hemp butter is something that I created with tying in my love for natural hair with the product development and the hemp aspect of things. So I started making my own products with like shea butter, jojoba oil, and I wanted to originally open up a brick and mortar that offered these products in bulk for people. And when I was trying to find space for this dream that I had, I realized that it was just unobtainable. So I went back to the drawing board and I said to myself, what if I create a hot new product first? And then, perhaps I can revisit the idea of opening a store once I am able to generate money from that. So that's when I was like, hemp, hair products, intertwined. And this was around the time when I started growing my locks. And I cared so much about what I was putting on my hair. And then I realized anything that we're putting on our hair, we should be able to put on our skin. And that's when I came up with hemp butter all-in-one. So it's a product that you would use just like shea butter or coconut oil, and it just works for everything. So while I initially started it as something for my hair, it really is like an all-purpose moisturizer. And early on, most of the people that were using it would give me feedback and say, oh, this works amazing for eczema, or this works amazing for this. And while I don't promote it as a solution for that, I have gotten positive responses from people that say that it's helped them for those different things. So from there, I developed different varieties of the hemp butter, and I later came out with a hemp balm, something that is very similar but using a flavor oil. So it's safe for your lips. And after that, I created different varieties of that, and that just started my whole journey with entrepreneurship.
Wow. So I've had, like I said, the product and it does work and it works well. Where can people find hemp butter?
So I have a link on my page that takes you to my hemp store. So in addition to hemp butter, I have other hemp products on there as well, such as my beanies, hoodies, and different things. Everything in the shop is made out of hemp. It is called Get Hemp. But it's also usable on my Instagram page. Are you on Instagram, by the way?
I am. It's under,
Okay.
and then I have another one that's the God&Matter that I just started, but it's Arlene Speaks. But what is
Okay.
your Instagram address?
So I'm on Instagram as Hempress Hill, HempressHill.
Okay.
So again, at Hempress Hill.
Okay. So at Hempress Hill on Instagram is where people can connect with you.
Yes, that's probably the best way. And I share a lot of what I eat on a regular basis, a lot of the photos and some of the key ingredients, and maybe like a short explanation of why, such as the sprouting or, making your own versus buying something in the store.
Good. Now let's go back because there was a couple of things that I should have probably followed up on. One, with buying canned beans, I don't know that that's a good idea, and you can't sprout them. So you're saying that people should do it with dry beans, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So my, what are we calling it? A quarantine stash consists mainly of dried beans, nuts, seeds, and abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables. And I'm actually growing my own. With the canned, a lot of times anything that you buy in the United States is pasteurized. And that is pretty much heating it at a very high temperature in order to kill bacteria so that it's shelf stable. And in addition to pasteurizing it, they usually add like salt, which will also prolong the shelf life and also give it the flavor that everybody's accustomed to. And then lastly, a lot of times the lining of the can, over time it can leach things such as BPA and other chemicals. So having things in cans is just not the best alternative altogether. Now, I will say that there are times when I do eat things out of cans, but if you have the option of picking dry or can, definitely opt for the dry, and then you can go through the sprouting process.
Great. I'm glad we clarified that. Then also with your role, I don't want to minimize it. You're actually like a trailblazer in the hemp movement, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So you are, many people have you to thank for your efforts and your advocacy. And I don't think that that's been properly valued here. So I just want to say thank you
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
for that. Sure. And then the next part of it, what else are you doing? You're doing something. You have a restaurant interest? Is
Yeah,
that?
so that is a spot that I co-founded in Adams Morgan, Spacey Lounge, DC, with Tati Collini of Spacey Cloud. And I had a shop with Simcatal, DC prior. And Tati and one of her partners approached me about opening up this concept store in Adams Morgan. So we sat down, talked, and started renting out the lower level of restaurant. And we utilized that space to test it out and sell hemp CBD products. And Tati is a designer and also a skateboard enthusiast. She's the one who actually got me into skateboarding. So we combined our passions and created this concept store.
Maybe we had a cross. I was saying that I actually have met Tati before. I first met photographing DC Fashion Week. And then met her again when we were exhibiting. We were doing like I think it might have been a show for raw artists, and we were on 8th Street Quarter. And during this week, they had different artists come into the different restaurants. And we happened to be in the same restaurant location. And I met her mom, I think, that same time. So she's awesome. But go ahead, tell me. So you, Tati, and one of her colleagues rented this space and you're testing it out, and then what happens?
And then it turned out to be something that people loved, and Tati moved forward with it and was able to take over the lease of the entire building. So Spacey Cloud Lounge is now 2 levels located on 18th Street in the heart of Adams Morgan. So I've taken a step back from the entire brick and mortar retail scene. Something that I discovered wasn't necessarily for me in terms of where I see myself going. So Spacey Cloud Lounge is still open with the exception of the temporary closures that we have right now. But that's a space that I helped to co-found and put a lot of my heart, energy, and ideas into, building that as an helping to make it what it is today.
Awesome. So where are you going now? What's your journey, and how does like your faith or what you love shape who you are? Because you are such a balanced person. You're incredible. And you're from Hawaii originally, I think?
Yes, I grew up in Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah, so I see myself, eventually living somewhere closer to the beach. I think that that's where my roots are.
You see yourself closer to the beach.
So what I was saying is, I know that I am going to move closer to the beach at some point, not necessarily Hawaii, but somewhere in this world that is closer to a body of water. But for now, I'm really working on zero waste and not contributing to any landfills. So I'm a very strong component of recycling and reusing. So I have so many glass containers at my house where I try to purchase things in bulk so I can minimize the amount of trash that I'm accumulating. And in terms of water, I have a 2.5 gallon water jug that I constantly fill up at places like local health and wellness grocers that have distilled water. So I try to keep my water bottle with me. So even when I'm out and about, I'm not tempted to buy water bottles. So that is very important to me. In addition to zero waste, I'm also trying to be radically self-reliant by growing my own food. So I did start a gardening project this year. So I have a compost that's on its way. I have lots of seeds that I've planted, and I have just a strong desire to turn all of the space I have into like a mini farm garden to share food with friends and family and not be so reliant on grocery stores.
So you're talking about permaculture.
Oh, okay. There's a term for it.
There's a term. It's interesting. I had that feeling too. And last year, actually, this time I was in New Zealand and I learned about
New Zealand.
permaculture. Yeah, I learned about permaculture. And permaculture is that living off the land. So instead of maybe sunflowers, you need to have sunflowers, but you could limit your flowers and maybe you could grow like cabbage. You could grow, other things that are nurturing to you, and then you and your neighbors could, trade with food, and the excess crop could feed other people who don't have food, and you live off the land.
Yeah.
Farming is the key. I think farming is ideal. You're speaking my language, and I actually have products that I've created like to market the concept of zero waste and using that whole idea of reuse, recycling, repurposing different items so that we are having zero waste and net zero effect on the environment. So that's very, very cool.
You are amazing. You are amazing. I'm so happy that you're doing that and that you have this podcast to share what you thought about. And I think that we're vibrating on the same frequency because it's like before this all happened, I feel like I've been mentally preparing for it without even knowing it over the last couple years. I've been able to be a lot more minimalistic. I can count and wear the amount of shoes I have in a week. I went from having like 40 different shoes that I wore to having 4 different pairs. I tend to dry my clothes outside in the sun when I can. I went through a transitional period where I left my place in Virginia that was holding me back for so long. I lived there for 11 years, and I got to a point where I was just like, I'm getting rid of all of my stuff. I rented a storage unit for my essential furniture that I knew that I was going to unpack it someday. And I just decided to be more minimalistic. So I don't go shopping for clothes. I don't go out to bars and spend money on drinks. All of the extra money that I have, I invested into my garden or into the food I eat. A lot of people believe that living a vegan lifestyle is expensive, and it can be expensive, yes, but there's other ways to make it affordable by not spending your money on things that are unnecessary like fast fashion. And I don't see myself ever taking prescription drugs. So if I can prepare myself now for the future and not have to, spend that money later on and kind of invest in everything that I'm doing now, then that's cool.
That's awesome. So, with all that you're doing, the clothing, do you design your own clothing?
Yeah, I do have one design that I worked on with Stacy Hemp. But mostly I am like more of a reseller. So I work with a lot of different companies around the world that manufacture hemp clothing. And I just put my own personal stamp on it by how I wear it, for example. The hat. So designing isn't something that I've really gotten into in terms of making my own clothes. That's something that I would like to do along the way. But as of now, I've invested in essential hemp clothing. So a hemp jacket that gets me through the winter. I mentioned I probably have a little more than 4 shoes, but all of my shoes are made of hemp, and I can wear them. A pair that I wear in the garden. I have a pair that I wear to the beach. I have a pair that I wear throughout the winter. I have a pair that I wear on my skateboard. So I've just invested in hemp clothing, and it lasts a lot longer. It's more durable. I try not to wear too many labels. I am going to show this label though. So this is the Stacy.
That's cool. Is that, what animal is that?
Well, this is the elephant.
Okay, I thought it was an elephant. That's really cool.
Yeah, so this is the closest I've gotten to designing. So just the placement of the logo and having the hemp shirt. But other than wearing Stacy Hemp, I don't really wear designs. I try to just wear maybe solid colors or solid designs that don't have anything written. I think that people are tempted to spend more on fashion when they wear labels. So I'm looking at it as I'm probably not going to grow too much more. So I can literally wear these clothes for the rest of my life.
That's awesome. I actually went through, my father passed away. I don't think I ever told you that, like a little over 2 years ago. And so there was this huge shift in me. You talked about being prepared for change. And they broke into my house, oddly enough, just after my father passed away. So I returned from the funeral to find that my house had been broken into. And it was such a violation, but my spirit was just like, donate everything. And I emptied my house pretty much, like maybe 95% of everything I had, I donated it. I don't know, I can't tell you how many trucks. I mean, I have receipts, but maybe like 6 trucks, 7 trucks donating of stuff that I had, visits, as I just had so much stuff that I didn't need. Like, I don't need this. I find myself buying some things now, because I was planning to move to New Zealand, but then I changed that and delayed it after, certain circumstances, like with my dad and my mom and stuff. My mom's not deceased, but my mom requires me to be here in the US for right now. But it's like, I don't need all this stuff. Why? I don't use it, so why do I have it? So it's like, okay, let me give it to people, Do you find that you're more creative having less things around you, that there's more creativity vibrating within you?
100%. And that applies to business as well. When you use what you have and work within whatever budget you have, it forces you to be creative, and creativity forces you to be different. And that's ultimately what sells your product or your brand. So being minimalistic forces you to be creative with how you're using things. So even in the kitchen, I'm a minimalist in the kitchen because I don't like to do dishes. So a lot of times use the same kitchen tools to get the process going. But not only does it force you to be creative, it forces you to save money, and you don't have the desire to collect stuff. I know exactly how much money I have to spend every month, and I make my decisions wisely based on that. I have no desire to spend money. Like, I don't spend money on, like I said, clothing, alcohol. Even when it comes to my garden, I haven't invested in fancy garden equipment. I had a wheelbarrow that one of the neighbors happened to be throwing away. And you talk about like faith and manifestation, God and matter. I went to Home Depot and I started looking at wagons, and the price tag was just not within my budget. And the next day, my neighbor is throwing away a wheelbarrow. So I don't think that that's a coincidence. These things happen often. You know, I feel as if I'm very blessed in that way. So I think that you use what you have and you're creative with that. You know, my compost is in a box, you know, like a biodegradable brown box. You know, they have all kinds of fancy composters that you can buy at the store, and they do this and they do that. But at the end of the day, it's like $100 on a plastic composter container, or $100 for, you know, something that is more necessary or more needed, you know, $100 on groceries.
Yeah, that's really, really wise. This has been a really great discussion. I'm going to ask you to come back again in the future.
I would love to. I would love to.
Great. So, Kyla, thank you so very much. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to say really quickly in a minute?
Well, I would like to say kudos to you for even bringing up New Zealand. New Zealand has been a dream. I met a couple of Kiwi farmers from there back in 2006, and I wanted to go ever since. I was able to take that trip. New Zealand is an untainted version of Hawaii, and I see myself living there sometime.
Yeah, I know I'm going to be living there. So kudos to you. Kudos to you, you know, as a woman of color going to New Zealand by myself. People were like, are you crazy? I had no problem. I was there for 36 days and it was so good. At one point, I even camped at the beach and it was just amazing. I made friends there, and one friend was like, okay, well, if you can't handle it, you know, here's my, text me and call me, I'll come pick you up. I stayed. And it was great, you know. I lived in like a bio shelter part of the time. I did like an Airbnb another time. I rented a little like cottage, and just different living experiences, and it was beautiful. So,
yeah, we should go there for their kiwi farming. They're very open to having people visit during that time to harvest.
They are to harvest. Yeah, they are. Have you had red kiwi?
I haven't had red. I've had yellow though.
Red kiwi? Like God like made that with his hands. I don't believe God's male or female. I think God's like everything, but God made that, like the hands are there. Red kiwi, I got it in New Zealand, in Rotorua, New Zealand. I went to the grocery store and I was like, red kiwi. And it was so good. And there were people staying. I was at a hostel, and there were people staying in Rotorua who actually picked kiwi, and they had not seen red kiwi before. There was the green that they had, or the gold. They were like, red? It's sweet and it is so good.
It sounds amazing. I hope I can find it here someday. Otherwise, it's worth a trip to New Zealand, right?
It is, and it's a good price. Kyla, thank you so much. God bless you, and I will be talking with you again. Thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you all for tuning in.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Take care.
So, what'd you think of Kyla Hill? I love Hempress Hill. She is not only a vegan advocate, she's a trailblazer. She walks a path that hears her own footsteps. And that's pretty much courageous. And not only is she walking to help herself, but she's helping others. There are lessons to be learned. God&Matter's next guest, Paul John Deere. Paul works to a rhythm